I never imagined that one ordinary afternoon would completely change the rest of my life. That day started just like hundreds of other days before it. I had gone to the grocery store a few blocks away from my home on Maple Street, the same store where I had been shopping for more than 30 years. I bought a few simple things: milk, bread, some vegetables, and a small apple pie that my son Ethan had loved ever since he was a little boy. As I walked slowly back toward my house, the evening sun was beginning to set, and the quiet suburban street looked peaceful and familiar. Children were riding their bikes, a neighbor was watering his lawn, and everything felt normal. But when I reached my front porch and tried to unlock the door, something strange happened. My key wouldn't turn in the lock. At first I thought maybe my hands were just tired, or maybe the lock was stuck, so I tried again more carefully. But the key still didn't move. That was when I noticed the lock itself looked different, newer than before. Confused, I knocked gently on the door, expecting my son Ethan to open it and explain what had happened. Instead, the door slowly opened, and my daughter-in-law Emily stood there with her arms folded and a cold, unfamiliar expression on her face. For a moment, we simply stared at each other in silence. Then she spoke in a calm but cruel voice and said something that made my heart sink instantly. "You don't live here anymore." I stood there stunned, unable to understand what she meant. Behind her, inside the hallway, I could see my son Ethan standing quietly with his head slightly lowered, avoiding my eyes. My name is Margaret Collins, and I am 74 years old. The house behind Emily is not just a place where I lived. It is the home my husband Daniel and I built together more than 40 years ago. When we first bought that little house, we were young and full of dreams, but had almost no money. The paint on the walls was peeling, the porch steps were broken, and the roof leaked whenever it rained. But Daniel and I didn't care, because we believed that if we worked hard enough, we could turn that small, worn-out house into a beautiful home. I still remember the weekends we spent fixing things together, painting the walls late into the night while our baby son Ethan slept in a small crib in the corner of the room. Over the years, the house slowly transformed, and with it, our lives did too. We celebrated birthdays there, decorated the living room every Christmas morning, and filled the kitchen with laughter during family dinners. That house held every memory that mattered to me. 10 years ago, my husband Daniel passed away after a long illness, and the silence in that house became heavy and painful. But even then, I never thought about leaving it, because every room reminded me of the life we had built together. When Ethan married Emily a few years later, I was happy to welcome her into our family. She seemed kind and respectful in the beginning, always smiling politely and calling me Mom. A year later, they told me they were having financial problems and asked if they could stay with me for a while until they saved enough money to get back on their feet. Of course, I said yes immediately. I believe that families should always support each other when times were difficult. For the first few months, everything seemed perfectly normal. Emily cooked dinner sometimes, Ethan helped with small repairs around the house, and we spent evenings watching television together in the living room. But slowly something began to change. Emily started making small comments about the house. saying it was too large for someone my age and suggesting that maybe I would feel more comfortable in a smaller apartment somewhere closer to the city. At first, I didn't take her words seriously. I thought she was simply concerned about me. But one evening, while I was passing the kitchen, I overheard her whispering to Ethan about the value of the property and how much money they could make if they owned it. She talked about renovations, real estate prices, and how selling the house could completely change their lives. That conversation stayed in my mind, but I tried to ignore it because I trusted my son. I believed he would never betray me. The next morning, I went to the grocery store like I always did. I had no idea that while I was gone, something terrible was happening behind my back. Standing there on the porch while Emily calmly told me I didn't live in my own home anymore felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. I looked at Ethan, hoping he would speak up, hoping he would say this was all a misunderstanding. But he remained silent, staring at the floor as if he couldn't face me. My chest felt tight and my eyes filled with tears, but I refused to cry in front of them. Instead, I placed the grocery bags down for a moment, took a deep breath, and quietly turned around. I walked away from the home that had been my entire world for 4 decades. That night, I checked into a small motel across town. The room was simple and quiet, and for a few minutes, I sat on the bed staring at the wall, trying to understand how my own family could treat me like that. But instead of breaking down, something inside me became calm and focused. People often believe that getting older means becoming weak or helpless, but what they don't realize is that age also brings patience and wisdom. After my husband died years ago, our lawyer had advised me to keep every document related to the house safe and organized in case any legal issues ever appeared. So that night I opened the folder where I had carefully stored every ownership paper, bank record, and property document. As I slowly read through them, something important became very clear. The house had never been legally transferred to Ethan. There were absolutely no official records showing that the property belonged to anyone except me. That meant if Emily was claiming they owned it, the documents she was talking about had to be fake. Early the next morning, I went to visit my lawyer, Robert Hayes, a man who had known my family for many years. When I showed him the documents Emily had mentioned, he examined them carefully for several minutes. Then he looked up at me with a serious expression and said the words that confirmed my suspicions. Margaret, these signatures are forged. He explained that whoever created those papers had committed a serious crime, and that the law would not ignore something like that. Within hours, he contacted the bank, checked the official property records, and filed a fraud report with the authorities. By the afternoon, the police had already begun their investigation. Later that evening, 2 police cars slowly drove down Maple Street and stopped in front of my house. Curious neighbors watched from their windows as the officers walked up the driveway and knocked on the door. Emily answered confidently, probably believing that she had everything under control. But when the officers began asking questions and comparing the documents with the official records, her confident expression slowly disappeared. The truth was undeniable. The papers were fake, the signatures were forged, and the house was still legally mine. I stood quietly near the driveway, watching everything unfold. The same
I've
house
been
that had
thinking about
once
the old
held my
days.
happiest
We had such good
memories
times,
had
didn't we?
now become the place where my own
I've been
family
thinking about
tried
the
to
old
betray
days.
me.
We had such good
After a
times,
few
didn't we?
minutes, the officer turned to Emily and
I've been
Ethan
thinking about
and
the old
informed
days.
them that
We
they
had such
had
good
no
times,
legal
didn't we?
right to remain in the property.
I've
For
been
the
thinking
first
about the
time,
old days.
Emily looked
We had such
shocked and
good times,
frightened.
didn't we?
Ethan finally lifted his
I've
head
been
and
thinking
looked
about
at
the old
me,
days.
but by
We
then
had
the
such good
damage
times,
was
didn't we?
already done. I slowly walked up the porch steps and crossed the doorway of my home again. The living room looked exactly the same as it had the day before, yet everything felt different. I looked around at the walls filled with memories of my husband, my son, and the life we once shared. Then I turned calmly toward them and said, "This is my house, and now you are the ones who need to leave." In that moment, I realized something important about life. People often think that older people are easy to ignore or push aside. But sometimes the quietest people carry the strongest determination. And sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the one who stands up, protects what belongs to them, and walks away stronger than before.